There are some things in life you never expect to be controversial. Mowing your lawn, washing your car, sitting on your porch with a cup of coffee. But in my neighborhood, under the ever-watchful eyes of the HOA, even the simplest act could be turned into a crime. And in my case, the act was one that shocked them to their core. Carrying my shotgun. Now, before anyone jumps to conclusions, let me set the record straight. I wasn't waving it around recklessly. I wasn't threatening anyone. I wasn't hunting in my yard. I was simply walking back from the field behind my house where I had been legally target shooting on private property. My shotgun was unloaded, barrel pointed safely down, and secured in my hand the same way any responsible gun owner would carry it. But to the HOA, logic never mattered. Perception did. And the perception they chose to see was of danger, chaos, and lawlessness. The HOA president had always had an issue with me. She liked her world orderly, predictable, and under her control. I was a problem from the beginning because I didn't fold under her petty rules. My grass length was always perfect, my house was spotless, but I refused to bend to the endless stream of suggestions she pushed through. I never painted my shutters the color she wanted. I never let her dictate how I decorated my yard. And now, with a shotgun in my hand, I had committed the ultimate offense, living my life outside her reach. A call came quickly. I heard her voice later through the whispers of neighbors, panicked and dramatic, as she told the police a man was patrolling the streets with a firearm. In her mind, this would be the moment she finally got me under control. She expected flashing lights, handcuffs, and a public humiliation that would cement her authority. What she didn't count on was the law itself. I was inside by the time the cruisers pulled up. Blue and red lights splashed across my driveway, casting long shadows across the iron gate that separated my property from the street. The officers stepped out carefully, hands resting on their holsters, scanning the scene with a calm but alert stance of professionals. Neighbors peeked out from behind curtains and half-open doors, waiting for the spectacle. The HOA president stood proudly at the sidewalk, pointing toward my house like she had summoned justice itself. To her, this was victory in the making. To me, it was an inconvenience. When the officers approached, I met them calmly. I explained where I had been, what I had been doing, and showed them the shotgun. Unloaded, chamber empty, safety on. I carried my permit, my ID, and proof of property ownership. I walked them through the state's open carry and private property laws. And as the conversation unfolded, their expressions changed. Suspicion melted into understanding. Understanding turned into acceptance. And before long, it was the HOA president, not me, who was on the defensive. They told her plainly. I had broken no laws. Everything I had done was within my rights. She pressed harder, insisting the HOA rules were being violated. That was when the officers reminded her, firmly, that HOA regulations do not override state law. The moment was priceless. She stood frozen, clutching her clipboard like it might shield her from the truth. The neighbors watching from their windows saw it too. The collapse of her authority, the limits of her power laid bare for everyone to witness. But even then, I knew it wasn't over. People like her don't stop after one defeat. They regroup. They plot. They look for another angle, another weapon, another way to turn the tide back in their favor. Sure enough, the days that followed were filled with her usual tricks. Violation notices appeared in my mailbox, accusing me of endangering the peace of the neighborhood. She called an emergency HOA meeting, drumming up fear by twisting the story, painting me as a reckless gun owner who threatened the safety of families and children. She used words like dangerous and unstable, hoping to stir panic where none existed. But here was the difference. This time, people had seen the truth with their own eyes. They saw the police leave without arresting me, saw the calm way I handled the situation, and realized the president's narrative was nothing more than theater. Whispers began to spread, but they weren't in her favor. Some neighbors even came to me quietly, admitting they admired how I stood my ground. For the first time, the foundation of her control began to crack. I could have left it at that, satisfied with my small victory, content to let the storm pass. But I knew better. This wasn't just about me or my shotgun. It was about every homeowner who had been bullied, fined, or shamed into submission by the HOA. And if she wanted a battle, then I was ready to fight it on grounds she couldn't control. Because unlike her, I understood something important. The law wasn't on her side. It was on mine. And when you fight with truth instead of fear, you don't just win battles. You win wars. The night after the confrontation, I stood on my porch looking out at the quiet street. The gate was shut, the shotgun locked away, and the air was still. But underneath that calm I could feel the shift happening. She had drawn the line, and I had stepped over it without fear. The next chapter of this fight would be bigger, louder, and harder to ignore. The HOA thought they could scare me with flashing lights and false accusations. But all they did was expose their own weakness. And the legal lesson I was about to deliver started on a quiet Saturday morning. The sun was barely rising when I stepped into my backyard, shotgun in hand. Not to cause trouble, not to intimidate anyone, but simply to clean and oil the firearm that had been in my family for years. Hunting was part of my upbringing, and maintaining the gun was routine. But in an HOA-controlled neighborhood, routine quickly turns into drama. Across the street, the HOA president saw me through her window. To her, the sight of a shotgun wasn't about maintenance or tradition. It was a chance to enforce her power. Within minutes, I heard the sirens. The cops pulled up, neighbors peeked out from blinds, and suddenly I was the villain of the street. The officers did their job. They asked questions, checked the weapon, and confirmed it was legally registered. There was no crime. No law had been broken. Still, the humiliation was real. My neighbors looked at me differently now, whispers carrying faster than the wind. By afternoon, flyers appeared in mailboxes. They spoke of a firearm incident, of residents disregarding safety. No names were mentioned, but everyone knew the target was me. People who once waved now crossed the street to avoid me. The HOA president had turned a simple act into a campaign against my character. But here's the thing. Fear works only on those willing to bow to it. I wasn't. I gathered evidence. Every flyer, every bylaw, the police report that cleared me. I studied the HOA rules carefully. Nowhere did it say I couldn't own or maintain a firearm on my private property. I even documented the sudden hostility from neighbors, just in case this went further. If the president wanted a war, she was about to get one, but not the kind she expected. The HOA meeting came sooner than I thought. The clubhouse was full, more people than I had ever seen attend. The president stood at the podium, dripping with false concern. She painted me as reckless, dangerous, a man putting the community at risk. Residents nodded, some fearful, others angry. Then it was my turn. I walked to the front and placed a stack of documents on the podium. Calmly, I explained the truth. The police had cleared me. The gun was legal. The flyers, however, crossed the line. They weren't just misleading, they bordered on defamation. I read aloud the bylaws, proving I had broken none. I told them I had spoken to an attorney, and if harassment continued, I was ready for legal action. The room shifted. Murmurs spread. Neighbors glanced at one another. The board members, usually so loyal to the president, looked uneasy. And for the first time, the president had no confident comeback. She muttered about misunderstandings and community harmony, but her grip on the room was slipping. The meeting ended in silence. The flyers stopped appearing. The whispers faded. Neighbors who once avoided me now offered awkward smiles. The HOA board sent me a letter, thinly veiled as an apology, assuring me the matter was closed. The president, once bold and confrontational, now kept her distance. Her power had cracked, and everyone had seen it happen. I hadn't just defended myself. I had reminded the community of a truth too often forgotten. Authority doesn't mean absolute power. Rules exist, but so do rights. And when someone abuses their position to control others, standing your ground is the only answer. They thought they could use the law to break me. Instead, they learned the law protected me. My shotgun remained locked away, safe and legal, just as it always had been. But the story spread, and the HOA president's reputation never fully recovered. She wanted to make me an example, but she became one herself. And that brings us here. What do you think? Was justice served when the HOA tried to twist the law against me, only to be exposed in front of the very neighbors they controlled? Or was this just one small battle in a larger war between independence and authority? That's for you to decide.